Shalom, this is Nazama Shalhamadabar Yasharal on my channel Nazama the Hebrew Mystic Healer. Before I get started, I would like to show some love to my 3D kin, the 12 tribes of Israel, the Hebrew Israelites scattered to the four corners of this third dimensional earth plane of existence. Much love and shalom to you. I would also like to show some love to my cosmic kin, scattered to the 12 dimensions of this universal egg matrix. The primordial dragons, the Nibiru and Anunnaki starseeds. Much love and shalom to you as well. And as always, show some gratitude to my viewers, excuse me guys, especially those of you who are subscribed. If you're not yet subscribed, please do so now, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Also, if you like this video, be sure to let me know by giving it a like. So in this video, guys, I'm going to talk about different paths and their relation to religions, but also ancestral closed traditions or ancestral traditions in general. So I want to talk about paths as in left, right, middle, and spiral or crooked. What do these paths mean? What do they entail? What traditions and or religions or belief systems are attached to them? And which one do I fit into? And I do think that's important, because it is important for us to not just follow our path according to our own personal, I don't know why my face keeps itching, guys, sorry. Our own personal, ancestry, because we all have unique, trees, right? But it's also important for us to follow the path that works best for us, for our purpose in this specific incarnation. So it's important to find out. And so this video might help you with that as well. So, and you can be on a certain path, like left, middle, right, or spiral, and still have a different type of belief system or tradition. But I am just giving a generalization of how this tends to overlap and where it all fits in. For example, allow me to first start by identifying the right-hand path. What is the right-hand path? In a nutshell, the right-hand path is best categorized by a path that believes in merging, serving, or returning to a higher power or powers, or God or gods. And there is a focus on usual externalized obedience, externalized service, externalized worship, or externalized ritual, which is focused on pleasing a god or gods for the purpose of, also while alive, but upon passing on, being able to rejoin with or merge with this particular god or gods. So that would be an example of a right-hand path. So what traditions and or religions fit into a right-hand path? Well, obviously all the mainstream religions, for the most part, fit into the right-hand path. So Christianity is an example of right-hand path. Islam is an example of right-hand path. Catholicism, which is really the same thing as Christianity. Also, Judaism, example of right-hand path. Wicca is an example of right-hand path. Even a lot of the New Age belief systems or starseed belief systems tend to be very right path oriented, right? Because they believe in light, so they're light polarized, and the right-hand paths usually are very focused on light-based religions and belief systems, and also because they believe in rejoining the source mind, or merging with the one, or recognizing oneness. So it may have some elements of the middle path, but really it's right path, because they don't really talk about balancing polarities. It's more so focused on the light. So these would all be examples on right path. Nothing wrong with being on the right path, but those are just generalizations. A lot of the Hebrew Israelites would fall under the right-hand path because of what everything I just mentioned. Even though there are also some examples of Hebrew Israelites that might be on the middle path or even the spiral path. Not so much on the left-hand path, but usually either the right, the spiral, or the middle. There are some there, but mostly it's right hand, at least in the way that the culture's been reconstructed at this point in time. So these would be examples of the right hand path. So what's the left-hand path by contrast? So whereas the right-hand path is more focused on merging with or aligning to or being in service to or worshiping an external power or powers, the left-hand path is more geared in developing your own. So instead of being worried about, pleasing or being obedient to a power outside of yourself, if you're on the left-hand path, you're more concerned with developing your own power, developing your own divinity, developing your own Godhead, right? So whereas the right-hand path, you may worship a certain deity, and your traditions and your rituals may be aligned based on the specific deity or deities that you are in service to, or you worship, or you try to merge with or connect with. And the left-hand path, if you're working with any type of external energy or deity, God or gods, usually you are working with them more so in a partnership, and it's for the purpose of making an agreement and them helping you to develop your God self. So it's not so much that you're worshiping them or that you're devoted to them. It's more so about them sort of showing you, hey, this is what you can do to kind of help you develop your own God self, right? So examples of someone on the left-hand path would be like Luciferianism, Satanism, the Draconian path, any role Luciferian type path would be an example of that. Now, this isn't devil worship. They don't worship Satan, or they don't worship Lucifer or anything like that, but they will work with like infernal divine intelligences for the purpose of activating their full Godhead. So that includes both their upper and their middle and their lower selves. So that's kind of their focus. They want to essentially become their own God. Whereas in the right-hand path, they want to serve or merge with God or gods. Okay, middle path. So the middle path would more so be aligned to Buddhism, to an extent Jainism, to an extent Taoism, right? I want to quickly say that Hinduism can fall under either the left or the right-hand path, by the way. So if somebody is, for example, a devotee of Kali, it would be considered more left hand, because Kali is more concerned with you awakening your God self and you really destroying your ego. So almost in a way, it can even be middle path to a degree. It's more so left hand though. Whereas if you are within the context of within the context of Hinduism, you're more so dealing with like Shiva or, Vishnu or Lakshmi or those types of gods, then they're more so on the the right-hand path. So they do kind of acknowledge, and Hindus do acknowledge, that these gods like are really part of Brahman or the one consciousness, and that people also have chakra points associated to them within themselves. So it is geared toward Kundalini awakening, which is a type of developing your God self, but it's still very focused on the external and is still very focused on pleasing the gods. So in that sense, it would be right hand. Now, with Buddhism and Taoism specifically, and to an extent Jainism, the focus is balancing the left and the right, balancing the feminine and masculine, balancing the light and the dark, because the left would be associated with darkness, with the feminine, with reception, with the unconscious. The right would be associated with the masculine, with light, with the conscious mind, with projection, right? So that would just be an example there. Well, the middle path is the balance between those two currents, with the focus of ascending out and breaking the wheel. So they're not concerned about becoming gods. They're not concerned about merging with or joining God. They're concerned about getting the hell out of the egg and breaking their wheel. So that would be the example of the middle path. Now, with the middle path, there are also some overlaps to an extent with the left and the right, because they are really trying to balance those two. But the difference between, for example, a middle path person and somebody on the spiral path is middle path is exclusively nonviolent and doesn't believe in harming and believe in complete extinguishment of the ego. So they're very much about detaching. So that is more so aligned with the middle path. The Essene path, to a degree, can take on some of those characteristics, but because they're very focused on light, even though they do acknowledge the feminine aspect of the divine, like the Earth Mother, they're still very much focused on light, and they're still very much focused on communing with the divine outside themselves, even though they do acknowledge it within themselves as well. So it can be middle. It does have some middle overlapping attributes, but more so it's right hand. So I hope that kind of helps clear that up with you guys. When it comes to the smaller types of belief systems, I would definitely say that aside from Wicca, which is more right hand, a lot of the other more witchcraft traditions would fall more within the spiral, which I will get to in a minute. And I would say the same thing with most of the indigenous type belief systems. Same thing also with voodoo, with hoodoo, with Santeria. Although hoodoo has more of like, mixing with Christianity, so it's a little different. But dealing with the Orishas, same thing. Dealing with like Native American animism is more spiral too. The ancient traditional witchcraft of Europe as well. Also, certain other practices in the Middle East, but even the Egyptian is still more so right-hand path. They have some overlapping with the middle path, some overlapping with the left, but primarily they are right hand because they do tend to focus more on, for example, Horus and Ra than they would like Set, which would be like more of the darker current. So they do kind of look at the light. They're still a very solar society. That's another thing. Solar-based belief systems tend to be very right-hand path. Lunar-based belief systems tend to be left-hand, but not always. For example, look at Islam. Islam has a lunar calendar. Islam, even their symbol is the crescent moon, but yet they're very right-hand path, extremely right-hand path. So it's not always the case. You can't really just go off of that alone. It's kind of an oversimplification, very rudimentary, but to a certain extent, that can also help identify whether a path is left or right. Not always true. And then you have the black sun, for example, so I'm not going to go into that. I'll just say that for another video. But so now we can get into the spiral path. So as I mentioned, the spiral path is more indicative to more of like the indigenous type tribal societies that are more based on animism, dealing with the spirits, dealing with the energy currents of the universe, dealing with nature, dealing with their own sovereignty. When they do talk to deities or gods, it's more so they're communing with them, like more on an equal playing field, instead of being of service to them. And not all spiralized traditions even deal with deities. More often than not, they deal with their own ancestors. They deal with spirits that are not quite at godlike status. They do like hedge jumping, riding the broom, shamanism, astral projection is how you would call it, like in the left to right hand or middle path. But basically that's what hedge work is. That's what shamanism is. So they do a combination of those practices. But where the spiral path is different specifically is that they will tend to touch on the left, the middle, and the right-hand path depending on the phase of their life. So the spiral path is actually closest to the organic, spiritual, and natural order of the universe. Because in the universe, everything happens in cycles or spirals. So it's not a circle, right? Because it's not the same thing repeating over and over and over again. Because even as we look at the luminaries, they'll pass through different celestial bodies in different ways at different times over the ages. We see the earth has gone through many cycles, right? That things will happen that are similar, but they're still a little different. It's still not time repeating itself. So it's a spiral, because when a spiral goes up or spiral goes down, like a spiral will go like this and it might drop down, right? So then when the second spiral comes around, it may seem almost the same width as the first spiral, but it's not the same. It's not a circle going over and over and over and over again in the same spot, right? Or even if a spiral goes up, same thing. So there are overlapping similarities. There are cycles, but it is not just this circle that's identical, just going over and over and over the same moment, forever. So that's the difference. So when something spirals out or spirals in, it can touch and overlap in all those regions. So if, a left-hand path symbolized the Sith and the right-hand path symbolized the Jedi, the spiral or crooked path would be like the gray Jedi, right? Because you couldn't consider the middle path as being the gray Jedi, because most, not all, but most middle pathers do not believe in violence, and they believe in striking a perfect balance and complete detachment from the physical world, from any sense of illusion, and from the reincarnation cycle. The spiralized path doesn't follow dogma. It's not straight, it's not rigid, it's very natural. And, nature can be loving and cruel. The universe can be either loving or cruel. Everything operates in cycles. Everything ebbs and flows. They're energy currents. And so the spiral path is actually representative of that. It's representative of the journey of the soul. It's representative of the journey of the cosmos, the journey of the earth, the journey of the universe at large. So it's very organic and it's very spiritual. And so the image of the spiral and even the labyrinth, which is another variation of that, or even like the triskill, any of these type of symbols, they all go back to antiquity. They go back to the very beginning of time, at least on this earth. I'm not talking about in the higher realms right now, but at least on this earth, all of these ancient symbols really go back to Mu. And that's because the ancient people understood the cyclical nature of themselves and of the universe. So it is a spiral. That's why you hear certain sayings like dancing the spiral of life. So we go through similar cycles, right? Like, for example, a woman will have her menstrual cycle every month, but at a certain point, it doesn't just go on forever. At a certain point, it stops, right? And some months it may be different, than others. I don't mean to get, a little TMI for some people, but let's just be adults here. Some cycles, she may have worse cramps. She may bleed heavier. Other cycles, she may bleed lighter. Okay, I'm just using that as an example. Men have cycles too, hormonal cycles every month as well, right? The way the moon is, certain lunar cycles are shorter, certain months are longer, certain months there's even 2 moons. With the solar cycles even, same thing. Because the sun also passes through certain luminaries in a different way depending on each age, depending on each year, right? We don't have eclipses like clockwork. We don't have, it's all spiral. It's on a spiral line. Life is not a line. Life is not linear. That is Greco-Roman thought. And that's fine if somebody follows that thought line, especially if they come from Greco-Roman heritage. But if you come from more, if you come from more of the indigenous, heritage, if you come more from that type of spiralized, concept of time within your culture, if you have more of that understanding of time and how things operate, then the spiral path is probably for you. If you're somebody that tends to go through a lot of phases and transformations in their life, that may be indicated that you are somebody that is on the spiral path. Your very life itself, even if you're not switching things up a lot on the external, your very life itself reflects that for you. It just happens that way, especially if you're somebody that's very in tune to like a lot of the celestial cycles, right? So somebody that is focused on, working through debts or karmas, or trying to align it, trying to work on more of their higher expression, then the right-hand path would probably be for you. Especially if you're somebody that felt like you were disconnected from your higher power or powers and you want to reconnect, then that's probably for you. If you're somebody that, believes in, disconnecting from this, it views Earth as kind of like a learning ground or prison, and really you don't want to be here anymore, and you're just trying to get to the point where you can break your reincarnation cycle, then the middle path is probably for you, especially if you're somebody that doesn't believe in repression, that believes in balancing both their currents. If you are somebody that wants to develop their God self, believes in complete sovereign expression, believes that you should learn how to master your own energy, be your own authority and your own God, then the left-hand path is for you. And as I said before, if you're somebody that believes that your life is, cyclical and that you can choose different points in time to work on different things, and your life is very organic and ebbs and flows, and so sometimes you might seem more like you're on the left-hand path, sometimes more the middle, sometimes more the right, then you're probably a spiral or a crooked pather. Somebody that doesn't mind coloring outside the line, somebody that doesn't live life through the straight and narrow and the rigid. So I hope this helped identify different paths. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely stay tuned. I still have videos I've been promising you guys coming up. I've just had to, go organically with the currents and make sure that I am flowing and I'm not trying to force information just because I said, oh, hey, I'm going to do this, and oh, it's been a few months. Well, it's not time. And when it is time, I'll bring it out. I promise you that. Also, as I always say, if you guys are interested in an akashic reading, I'm a retro cosmic akashic reader. I'm also about to start the draconic natal starseed chart. It's not really a chart, it's more placements, where I do your draconic natal chart and then I tell you what your starseed placements are, which is also more accurate to your soul expression than the tropical or sidereal. So if you're interested in a retro cosmic akashic reading where you get to know about your specific past lives and origin, and or the draconic natal placements, which talk about your soul expression and those celestial influences, definitely hit me up. Check out my Patreon if you want to learn how to activate a lot of this within yourself, and for spiritual techniques and tools, definitely check that out. All of these links are in the drop-down menu. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Love you all. Take care, and shalom.